Everyone always loves talking about which is the strongest, power scaling, in a fight which Godzilla would win over the other. But what about which Godzilla is the smartest? Which one is the galaxy brain, super smart king of the monsters, and who is the smooth, no lumpy brain, mutated walking cancer pile? This has been an idea that I actually have been thinking about doing for some time, and I think it's finally time to actually put it into action, because it's something that I think actually is kind of a good thing to talk about, especially with all the different versions of Godzilla that we've gotten. Since throughout the years, Godzilla has been portrayed many different ways, as a destroyer, as a protector, as a force of nature, and really everything in between. But along with that comes varying levels of intelligence. After all, to be a protector means needing to understand very complex things, whereas to be a destroyer, depending on the way it is executed, it could be simply a mindless force of nature, or it could be a deliberate, cold, calculating, understanding monster that knows exactly how to hurt humanity the best, and is entirely aware of the horror it causes. So before we get into the video, what are your thoughts on which Godzilla incarnation is the smartest? Who do you think is the dumbest? Leave a like and subscribe while you're down there. Starting off with I was going to be starting off with the dumbest, but I'm thinking we actually should start off with the one that you really can't tell the intelligence of, at least in its capacity as within the story itself. And the best one for this, I think, actually is the original Shodai Godzilla. Now, within the Godzilla source material, the theater program that was presented with the original movie, we do know that the original pre-mutation Godzilla-like organisms actually lived at the bottom of the ocean in a fairly sizable community and existed relatively peaceably alongside humanity. Yes, the people of Odo Island were aware of it and made sacrifices to it, but this was not really something that actually did have a direct effect on the Godzillas. They just was something the islanders believed as a superstition. And throughout the original movie, the original Godzilla is portrayed as a somewhat confused and rage-filled creature lashing out in pain. It is kind of hard to gauge the intelligence when it comes to that confusion, because it isn't really aware of everything that's going on. It's not deliberately seeking to cause destruction of humanity, it's simply a natural byproduct of its confused and raged state. As for the other unknown ones, these would be things like the Gemstone Godzilla, Snow Godzilla, and the various other G-Fest shorts depictions of Godzilla. Because we really don't get to see much time with any of these individual incarnations, we can't really gauge their intelligence. After all, you do need a bit of a long period of time to see and experience the character in order to kind of gauge on its personality, its intelligence, and various sort of things like that, which with those, we don't really have that much to show. However, if someone does feel free to disagree, I'd be very happy to hear in the comments below. As for the absolute dumbest of the dumb, smooth McBrainy Brain Godzillas, I'd actually have to say, the, I guess, dunce cap of stupidity belongs to Shin. Now, pump the brakes for a sec, I got my reasons. Reason I think Shin Godzilla is the dumbest form of Godzilla is intelligence. Shin acts purely on instinct. He does not know what he is doing. In fact, most of the movie, he is just simply wandering around in confusion. This is actually not that different from the original Godzilla, but one thing that takes this a little step further from confusion to kind of stupid and not really being aware of anything is the original Godzilla was at least somewhat aware that humanity kind of had something to do with it, but it didn't really exactly know what. With this, it was simply a mutant whatever the heck, it's believed to be a mutant prehistoric reptile, but we don't actually know, that was only able to survive because it's an extremophile colony that just rapidly mutated in response to any external stimuli. When it got up onto land, it was in pain and confused and panicking. That's why it's like screaming the entire time it's out. It also has no real awareness of what is an intelligent threat or what is not a threat, as seen when it utilizes atomic ray. Again, everything is a response to an outside stimuli evolving to counter it. After the first super heavy ordnance penetrators slam into its back and detonate, it activates the ability to weaponize its nuclear fuel source to create large energy beams that destroy the B2 bombers, not the B1s. However, after doing this, it proceeds to exhaust all of its nuclear fuel, going into a basically diet coma for over 2 weeks. It doesn't have a control on what it's doing, it is simply just exhausting all of its power to just cause destruction around it. Something that even later on in the movie, it is shown again with all of the drones burning out its nuclear fuel source and rendering it unable to really fight against the coagulant system that was being implemented into its body to cause it to disperse all of its heat. It is not really in control of what it is doing, it is simply responding to everything that is happening. Only slightly above the intelligence, or lack thereof, when it comes to Shin, is I would say Zilla. The reason I'm putting Zilla slightly above Shin is we see Zilla is actually able to possess some degree of emotional attachment. That is a fairly complex thing to understand and does require a degree of intelligence. It is visibly and vocally distraught after it finds its offspring are destroyed. While it also is very instinct driven, in fact that's the main reason it comes to New York City in the movie, is to just simply find a place to nest, that also shows that it at least has some understanding of how to use the tunnels, how to dig tunnels, and hide from the military. It was aware humanity was a threat, and it didn't really actively try to engage humanity in a fight until we blew up its nest. Now it is lured out by the promise of large piles of fish, again showing it's maybe not the brightest bulb, as it was kind of not aware at all that this was a trap. But once it was aware that this was a trap, it actually decided to GTFO and would also start setting ambushes. Again, that requires a significant degree of planning ahead and forethought, though it ultimately was allowing it to be blinded by anger and rage and lash out at any and all humanity, as there really isn't much way that it could have understood that Nick Tadpoles and the rest of the crew that infiltrated the Madison Square Garden nest had some sort of magic voice box to communicate with the planes. So, well, it may have just simply assumed all humanity was guilty, which honestly, fair point, giving it a slightly greater degree of intelligence. However, it was not able to anticipate and really plan ahead for things, such as the cabling on the bridge. After all, it had very large claws, it could have easily sliced through those and escaped. Instead, it ran into the bridge, got itself tangled after previously demonstrated it jumped over previous things. Again, some things of smart, some things of really turbo dumb. Standing head and shoulders above Zilla, we actually have GMK, in my opinion. The main reason for this is why it doesn't belong in unknown, since GMK Godzilla is kind of a weird anomaly. In movie, it is not known if this is simply a manifestation of the souls of those killed by Japan during WW2, and it is simply the souls as a physical mass attacking Japan. If this is some sort of it's not the resurrection of the original, we know that it is not a resurrection of the original, or rather that they simply just possessed another member of Godzilla's species to do their bidding a la remote control soul work. Either way, it realistically doesn't matter since we see its actions, and it does show it has some degree of intelligence. Now again, whether this is a collective intelligence of the souls, or it is the souls influencing the intelligence and behavings of an actual true-to-form Godzilla, is unknown. The results are kind of all that matter. We see this does possess at least some degrees of rudimentary intelligence when it comes to battling. It is capable of anticipating the methods of which Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah are going to be attacking, and utilizing those attacks and their patterns to get an opening. Jumping out of the way of Baragon, smacking with his tail to open it up for a killing blow, against Mothra, recognizing what her attack patterns are with trying to sneak up behind him, to Atomic Blast obliterate him, and underwater when facing King Ghidorah, grabbing his head, pulling it in front of the D3 warheads that were being launched at him to cause King Ghidorah to be damaged. Those are things that an animal simply would not be capable of doing, rationalizing things such as weaponry and understanding the methods by which it works. However, it also shows some degree of not intelligence at work, namely, after the atomic ray comes blasting out of its neck from the wound opened by Tazo Tachibana, it decides to, I am going to atomic ray blast again. This ultimately would be a fatal question mark decision, as Godzilla would concussively detonate underwater, resulting in its apparent end. Now, is it really game-ended or not? Because we still see its heart beating at the end. And again, this is kind of where the supernatural and the being a soul reincarnation thing, or being remote controlled by the souls, kind of comes into question, since that would kind of shift things here or there. I mean, if it was the souls controlling a living body, obviously they'd have no attachment to whether it can work, because, I don't know, maybe they could manifest a new one, or if it was simply manifestation, they could just create another one altogether. Regardless, it doesn't really display a lot of intelligence in some cases, and it does display more in others. Now, the planning in which it displays is much more complex than the intelligence displayed by something like Zilla. Meaning, I would say that it is more intelligent than Zilla. Now, the gap between GMK and the next one is actually a fairly sizable gap, as the bottom of the barrel is actually pretty far below, and really everything else is actually much, much closer towards the top. It's just that there's this massive gap in the middle. Which is why, on this list, I would actually say fourth belongs to -1. Now, I have a reason for this. Again, I have a feeling this is going to get blasted. It does, much like several of the others, display some degree of problem solving. The biggest one is when the giant inflatable bags are being used to drag it to the surface, it begins to cut into them to try to escape. However, that's really the only time it really does anything like this. Throughout most of the movie, it is a cold, calculating, laser-focused destroyer actively hunting down Japanese ships. It also displays a very high degree of intelligence when the patrols that are sent out to lure it with its own cry. It is aware that these are not a member of its own kind, since it takes the boat and throws it into town, showing that it is aware of what humans are doing, it's aware of what humans are, and it's to send a message of terror, which is another thing that the thing does throughout the entire movie. It is aware of humanity, and it actively wants to, 1, terrify us, and 2, wipe us out with psychopathic just efficiency. However, it is also capable of being tunnel vision blinded by its own rage. It does not at all focus on the ships, which present a much greater threat to it at the end of the movie, instead hyper-focusing on Shikishima, which there is really no way that it could have actually known that was Shikishima from the island. Possibly, I mean, it does have very good eyesight. Godzilla in -1 is confirmed to have very good eyesight, hence is able to use its base, the atomic ray, with pinpoint precision. But with his flight goggles on, and of course being inside the cockpit moving as quickly as it is, I highly doubt Godzilla will be able to notice it. This, I think, was definitely for narrative purposing more than anything, and Rule of Cool is definitely in effect for it. However, this tunnel visioning is also shown in after the Takao fight. First, Godzilla goes to just attack the Takao straight up. Now it does go underneath the Takao and blow it up completely. However, it also leaves the rest of the humans still alive, instead of being like its warpath wants to be and just completely destroy everything. Actively showing it revel in the destruction is again a further sign of its own intelligence, showing that it is aware of what it is doing, it understands what it is doing, and it wants to cause it. Immediately counterbalanced by its usage of the atomic ray does damage its own body. However, this is not really out of a state of recklessness, and more so, it simply doesn't care about the pain it causes. This is to its own detriment, as at the end of the movie, when its body begins to destabilize after getting ripped apart by the pressure differential so quickly, it does not stop the atomic ray blast from beginning to sort of leak out through its body. Had it simply not tried to atomic blast everyone and just waited for its body to repair itself, even Shikishima flying the plane into it and blowing its head up kamikaze style wouldn't have killed it. It would have just regenerated its head. It is because of the combination of the built-up atomic energy and the decapitation strike that the excess radiation caused its body to break apart. Now, ultimately, we know Godzilla survived at the end of -1, hence the sequel being worked on at the moment. But Godzilla was always aware that it could just run away, or not even run away, just simply wait, heal itself up, and come back for more punishment, because humanity can't really threaten it. Now that could speak to a degree of overconfidence, and there is some ambiguity as to, on Godzilla's first pressurization sequence, whether it itself stopped the atomic ray charge when all the spikes were tracked into its body, or that was the pressure forcing the spikes back into its body and canceling out the atomic ray. Not really known, and that could again point to more intelligent or less intelligent. depending on the two. So it's kind of in a bit of a gray zone, which is why I put it lower on this list. Again, not to say it is stupid, it's just less intelligent than many others who display much greater degrees of intelligence and problem solving. Fifth, I would say belongs to Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. We see him doing a fair degree of problem solving in his battle against Megaguirus and against the, well, black hole cannon. Mostly this is against Megaguirus, as he is capable of anticipating her attacks, utilizing her own speed against her, and being aware her speed makes her more than a match for him in physical combat. He cannot rely on brute force. He needs to learn her patterns and anticipate and counterattack when she is attempting to attack him. This is how he manages to slice off one of her claws and catches her with his atomic ray. She can't really harm Godzilla too badly, but he also can't hit her because she can just no-sell everything by dodges. Though there are many times throughout the movie, especially that final fight, where Godzilla displays the ability to outsmart her, utilizing her frequent tactics, namely hit and run attacks, in order to gain an upper hand, grabbing her stinger and breaking it with his jaws when she tries to go for a head stab, when she does an impalement stab into his abdomen, grabbing the tail stinger and slamming her into the ground, anchoring her to the ground for him to do a flying body slam onto her, and slicing off her own claw when she came for a charge at him with his dorsal spines, ducking down so the sharpness of the spines would slice off her claw. This eventually got to the point where all he needed was to land one atomic ray, and she was gone. And towards the end of the movie, when the black hole is launched against Godzilla, he is able to anticipate and understand that this is something humanity is attempting to use against him, so he might as well try to attack it to destroy it. Now, this could potentially be instinctive, but going along with Godzilla's ability to understand threats, anticipate, and counter them, I would say this is something far more than just simply instinctive, as he deliberately waits until it gets closer to him to attack. Up sixth, I'd say we have Tokyo SOS Godzilla, or Kiryu-Goji. I mainly say this because this Godzilla is, one, aware when he is outmatched in a fight, and simply leaves after his first battle with Kiryu, sporting a massive scar on his chest. As we see in its follow-up movie, Godzilla has been away for around a year, waiting and healing rather than going out and continuing to attack Japan. However, it does display something akin to territorial behavior, namely game-ending the Kamibas, as it doesn't seem to have actually eaten the Kamibas as if it doesn't actually hunt for food, rather territorial reasons. So, could go either way on that. But when it comes to in battle, it does display some anticipation and awareness of various means of attack. Namely, when Kiryu stabs it with the Mazer blade, it fires an atomic ray to destroy the arm and pull out the blade itself from its own body. Not even just pulling the blade out, it grabs it and just throws it aside. In Godzilla Tokyo SOS, it actually uses Mothra's protective instincts against her, aiming an atomic ray blast at her two offspring, making her jump in front of the atomic ray to shield them. Mothra was largely able to dodge Godzilla's attacks, giving her the advantage in terms of the high ground over him, and her scales actually preventing Godzilla's atomic ray from being used against her itself. It actually is very easily shown to block his atomic ray and reflect it back at him. Her gusts of wind were also easily capable of knocking Godzilla down. The larval Mothra, however, were not nearly as big of a threat, since they couldn't really engage Godzilla up front and could only rely on simply spraying him with functionally silly string to him. After all, with her out of the way, they couldn't do anything until Kiryu ended up subduing him. So he is shown to be able to very easily gauge the threat level of various enemies. Since there are many kaiju within this incarnation of the timeline, it's very likely Godzilla has faced many different opponents and is aware of what makes enemies more dangerous and more threatening. Now that is purely speculative on this hand. As well as he displays an ability to anticipate, again as many other Godzillas have shown to do, human weaponry and how to avoid them. When Kiryu charges up the Absolute Zero cannon, he aims an atomic ray blast to knock Kiryu over on several different occasions, particularly when he's going to be firing the Absolute Zero cannon, knocking him backwards and deflecting the hit. Well, not really deflecting the hit, but causing Kiryu to misfire in the opposite direction, leaving him completely unscathed. At number 7, we actually have my first Godzilla, Godzilla 2000. This Godzilla is actually portrayed more as a true force of nature throughout the entire movie, but we do see varying degrees and actually generally consistent shades of intelligence throughout the film with him. The biggest and best example of this actually is the end when he finally destroys Orga. He is able to consciously recognize from the outside he can't really damage Orga's body, and he is able to easily damage Orga's body with his atomic ray, but Orga is able to just out-heal the damage. Everything he does is essentially repaired, not perfectly, but more than sufficient for him to keep on fighting. Capable of recognizing a stalemate and figuring out a counter to this annoying healing factor he copied and, well, it really made even more powerful than Godzilla's own. So, how to solve the problem? Decapitate the head. When Orga attempts to swallow Godzilla, Godzilla sees an opportunity to strike at the weak point, his brain. Releasing a massive energy pulse throughout his body, it blows up the top half of Orga's body. Even if Orga was able to regenerate from that hit, the brain is gone. With no brain, it's essentially a brain-dead cancerous lump of flesh. It would simply die in the end because there's no governing higher intelligence. Which means that this Godzilla is actually aware, at least to a degree, of the importance of something like the nervous system. Though he is also capable of recognizing when a threat is significantly more than he has bargained for. He shrugs off everything humanity throws against him, even the full metal missiles which were really designed to pierce his armored hide. They do show some damage to his body, but he is able to heal this off actually relatively quickly, as shown in the fight against the UFO. Those wounds are basically gone. So while they hurt initially, they don't really last. However, when confronted with the UFO, Godzilla quickly is able to realize this is significantly more powerful than he bargained for. And following 2 blasts from the plasma cannon, he decides to retreat and rethink his strategy. Even more so later on in the movie when he sees the spaceship atop a tower and decides to destroy the tower, hopefully in a way to stop this annoying UFO from continuing to harass him. Though it doesn't work, it is still at least a good amount of thinking to show that, yeah, this thing is utilizing the tower in some way. I should destroy the tower. At number 8, we actually have Zilla Jr. from Godzilla the series. I will also voice, I am not too familiar with Hanna-Barbera Godzilla, so that is actually not going to be on this list because I'm not really too familiar with it myself, and I don't really want to make any judgments on it since I really don't know about it too much. But the main reason I say Zilla Jr. is, one, actually aware humanity is relatively its ally, at least through Dr. Nico Tatopoulos. It is also capable of recognizing something of familial connections, as Dr. Nico Tatopoulos is something of an adoptive father to it. It will listen to, human commands. Capable of recognizing, the various humans that it has worked with. Though this is not exactly perfect, as its instincts and other events have been shown to hijack this intelligence it does possess, namely the Komodorax, and when the Leviathan aliens are able to cybernetically revive its father, it opts to go with the cybernetic enhanced alien Zilla, rather than the humans that have been with it the entire time. Though that could also partially be due to the alien mind control somewhat trying to seep into its brain. We don't actually know which way it is. But its ability to recognize humans as more or less allies, the fact that it doesn't go and just mindlessly wipe us out and it continues to allow us to exist, despite this Godzilla actually being far more in line with a classical depiction of Godzilla, well, it's more of a Heisei and Showa era depiction of Godzilla, that's more sure than anything, show that it is aware of humanity, it is actually rather intelligent, and it does view humanity as allies, as well as capable of formulating relatively complex battle tactics, utilizing the terrain to its advantage, utilizing and exploiting the weaknesses of enemies, and somewhat coordinating with human and kaiju allies. As well as recognizing when other kaiju are actually not necessarily hostile themselves, assisting things like the Loch Ness Monster when her youngling was kidnapped and helping to free it. We've got another junior here. At number 9, we have the true Godzilla Jr. This being the Godzilla Soar from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, Little Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and later, of course, Godzilla Jr. as he is in Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Main reason I put him up here is, while we don't get to see him in battle nearly as often as other incarnations of Godzilla, this one displays a much greater emotional spectrum than other Godzillas are shown. And these are actually rather complex emotions, something that does require a rather high level of intelligence in order to really process. It is capable of recognizing Heisei Godzilla as an adoptive father. It is entirely aware that it is not its true father, but it recognizes it as such. It does take a little bit of time, which again shows its intelligence that it grew to see Godzilla as a father after saving it from Mechagodzilla, as well as also understanding how to call for help. It's important to remember that this is actually psychic in the Heisei timeline, which, as suggested from Godzilla itself in some of the movies, does naturally confer a greater degree of intelligence. We see in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, it is not a mindless attacker of things, it is actually rather passive and peaceful. As with the humans that are on the island, it simply waves to them, it is happy to see them, displaying almost a very youngling-like sense of innocence. However, when Space Godzilla shows up, yes, it does try to greet Space Godzilla waving hello, and yeah, this doesn't end well for it. However, this is likely due to the fact that it is a clone of Godzilla. It also is psychic, it recognizes this is something similar to myself. There really aren't others like them. However, the second it is aware Space Godzilla is a threat, it immediately calls for Godzilla. Again, understanding that Heisei Godzilla is going to protect him, yeah, pretty smart. And when fighting against Destoroyah, it utilizes Atomic Ray against Destoroyah, especially targeting it in flight, making it slam into a building in order to try to bury it. Though it does also display some not as much intelligence in this fight, as it doesn't really bother trying to get out of the way of Destoroyah when it's behind a building, leading to Destoroyah jumping out and ending up taking it down, ultimately resulting in it perfecting its evolution to become Perfect Destoroyah. But its ability to attack Destoroyah and anticipate where he is flying, as well as again targeting him primarily in flight, utilizing the fact that it is much less armored and more vulnerable in its flight form, to inflict a pretty severe amount of damage to it. Next, we have Final Wars Manila. Yes, I am bringing up Manila in this, not with the Showa era Manila, because we don't really get to see as much of that, and really much of that is actually interchangeable with this, as one of the movies where Manila is shown is literally not even real. But Final Wars Manila does carry basically a concentrated version of everything we've seen of prior Showa Manila, so yes, you can loop in Showa Manila here as well. Millennium Final Wars Manila is, I would say, one of the most intelligent versions of Godzilla actually we've ever seen, so we are getting towards the higher tier of this list now, specifically due to the fact that it is capable of, one, rationalizing things with humanity, conversing with humanity, confirming that it is unambiguously as intelligent, if not more so, than humanity. But more than that, it is able to convince Final Wars Godzilla to not wipe out humanity. It is capable of understanding self-sacrifice and putting itself between Godzilla and the humans to protect them. Capable of recognizing things such as friendship and allies and mercy, as well as displaying a willingness to just simply let bygones be bygones and allow both to live and let live. Being capable of convincing a sort of, violent, aggressive protector after Godzilla had been literally imprisoned in ice for unknown amounts of time to not wipe out said humans that imprisoned it, I'd say, yeah, that takes a pretty good degree of articulating and reasoning. 11th on this list, I would actually say we have Godzilla Earth from the Netflix anime trilogy. We're not going to be covering Godzilla Filius, as that really isn't the actual Godzilla, it is Godzilla Earth. I would say this is one of the most intelligent we've had of all Godzillas, purely down to his age, the fact that he is over 200,000 years old, having experienced a great deal, fought many kaiju, literally taken over the entire world and reshaped its biosphere to his liking, as well as the fact that he is shown to be regularly patrolling the entirety of the planet. When Godzilla Filius is destroyed, he goes to investigate. Since Godzilla Filius is more or less what it was originally 20,000 years ago, it is capable of understanding that if something that can take out that might potentially be capable of taking him down, or at least eventually rivaling him. So it should be snuffed out as soon as possible. As well as, when it comes to the battle against Mechagodzilla City, the attempt to do to Godzilla Earth what was done to Godzilla Filius, namely impaling those electromagnetic rods into its back to allow his charge to build up and eventually self-detonate, doesn't work on him. When this is done, he attempts to change the electromagnetic energy into simply heat to not destroy himself, not allow the charge to build, as it is designed to resonate with the atomic frequency of his atomic spikes. Instead, channeling this elsewhere into thermal energy to prevent an overload. That shows a very complex understanding of the way in which his atomic ray works, and the side effects of what can and will happen if it is allowed to build out of control. It also naturally possesses a shield, which is what eventually allows it to become the atomic ray, and it more or less just keeps this up at all times. Recognize it doesn't really need to use the atomic ray most of the time, but will if it does need it. 12th, I would say, is Heisei Godzilla. Yeah, Heisei Godzilla is pretty smart. While he may not have the sheer life experience that Godzilla Earth possesses, it does possess, well, that same emotional range that something like Manila does. He is capable of recognizing allies and enemies, understanding that Rodan was an ally, understanding Rodan's sacrifice, and coming to the protection of the Godzillasaurus even before it hatched, able to sense it. It is also confirmed that just simply being a psychic, Godzilla being actually the most powerful psychic, he has a very human-like level of sentience. And seeing as Godzilla was able to predict and tell exactly where humanity was when it came to try to ambush him, he is likely a lot smarter than humanity. Since he was able to, one, use psychic abilities to tell where we were, and because his mind is actually very difficult to read and influence, likely shows he's got some kind of ability to push back against us. When his fight against Mechagodzilla 2 happens, he is able to recognize his atomic ray is simply not working against the mechanical menace, displaying very visible confusion and changing around his tactics into a more physical brawling style to shove the creature down, rather than simply atomic ray blasting as he's basically always done. Similar to Godzilla 2000 when fighting Orga, Godzilla Heisei recognizes Biolante's incredible regenerative capabilities, once again derived from his own, understanding that it is capable of disrupting her cellular division, but externally can't inflict much damage. So, what does he do? He goes for the decapitation strike attempt. While it doesn't have the same degree of atomic pulse that Godzilla 2000 had, it did blast the back of Biolante's head open, creating a massive hole in her body, which, yes, she did able to heal. And ultimately, Godzilla was unable to prove victorious in this fight due to the anti-nuclear energy bacteria, but that's a whole other story for another day. His ability to understand that later on in the fight against Mechagodzilla 2, Rodan was actually an ally, not simply an enemy as it was before. And of course, the taking in of Godzilla Jr. and looking after him. Even before Jr. really came around to becoming his adopted son, he was going out of his way to protect Jr. Something like altruism is not exactly something you'd expect in an animal. In his fight against King Ghidorah, he demonstrated an energy pulse, utilizing that in close quarters against King Ghidorah as he was unable to use his atomic ray. And with the atomic spiral ray, a more powerful version of his own atomic ray, he recognized the regular wasn't working, so he amped it up a little bit, resulting in decapitating King Ghidorah's head. And to prevent King Ghidorah from escaping, he destroyed its wings. When it came time to fight Space Godzilla, Godzilla actually worked with humanity in order to stop the monster. Even though Mogera had previously attacked him, he opted not to resume hostilities, instead focus on the monster that one had kidnapped and imprisoned his son, and was also able to recognize how Space Godzilla was drawing in more power through Fukuoka Tower, opting to instead destroy that weaken Space Godzilla, then go for the takedown. Those are somewhat complex tactics and somewhat complex understanding of various emotions. Again, capable of not necessarily forgiving and letting go of what humanity did, but more so understanding in the moment, we have a bigger threat. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and we'll hash this out later. But also the fact that he doesn't actually just destroy humanity all of the time shows that he's willing to kind of let humanity bygones be bygones, and just kind of exist in peace. Almost all of that is actually applicable to number 13, which is the second generation Showa Godzilla. This one displays a lot more advanced, I guess you should say, combat tactics. Things like the flying to take down Hedorah, showing a very high degree of problem solving, and is much more frequently allied with other monsters, showing his ability to understand things like companionship and friends. He is also capable of understanding, again, altruism to a greater degree, in a sort of live and let live understanding with humanity. Yes, despite all of the destruction humanity wrought against him, and well, his kind with the atomic bombs, he was willing to work together with them in the form of Jet Jaguar to face down and defeat both Megalon and Gigan. His ability to work with other kaiju, namely ones like Anguirus, Rodan, and Mothra on several different occasions to come together and prevent a greater threat from taking down the Earth, is really shown on display many, many times, namely Ghidorah the three-headed monster. As is important to remember, in that movie, the Mothra larvae he allies with is actually one of the two Mothra larvae he faced in Godzilla vs. Mothra, or Mothra vs. Godzilla. He's also capable of very much understanding reasoning from other kaiju that, yes, even though humanity has done absolutely nothing for them and they continue to try to attack us, Earth is still his home as well. Again, he also understands that humanity is an enemy of his for various reasons. One, they just keep trying to attack us. I don't understand why, but I just want to live. Because that is a lot more visualized, verbalized, and actually much more consistently shown, as well as the aforementioned creative problem solving, namely twisting off Mechagodzilla's head and then attempting to do the same thing a second time, shows that he is very smart, and again, more consistently than Heisei Godzilla. As goofy as Showa era was, Godzilla was actually pretty smart there. Following that, I would say the next smartest is actually Final Wars Godzilla. Since the origin of Godzilla in this timeline is actually very similar, it is explicitly stated that it is very similar to the origin of Godzilla in many other kaiju, their past incarnations, Godzilla does display that same companionship with various other kaiju that are in the movie, namely the Earth Defenders Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar, as they are the only kaiju he does not end. He allows them to live because he is aware they are just simply being mind-controlled by aliens. He knows them, they are his friends, and he understands that it would be wrong to end them. It is better simply to sever the alien control over them than unnecessarily kill a friend. He is also capable of understanding in the moment humanity is leading him place to fight the Exilians' mind-controlled monsters. And that even though he harbors an intense grudge against humanity for imprisoning him in the ice, they are a problem he can sort out after. He also is capable of listening and understanding Manila's reasoning for allowing humanity to live and let live, ultimately being won over by his much younger counterpart and allowing them to live. A relatively mindless creature, or just simply an angry, vengeful destroyer, wouldn't really be capable of listening and responding to an argument being made in this case, or really even debating in any sort. One capable of understanding humanity, one capable of understanding reasoning, and one capable of understanding allies and mercy are, again, relatively complex traits. All of this is absolutely quintupled down on our next and second to last version of Godzilla on this list, Monster vs. Godzilla. While we don't see the same cartoonish degrees of intelligence displayed in something like Showa Era 2 Godzilla, we see a much more Heisei Era Godzilla portrayal of occasional allies, though with much more emphasis on that in the Monsterverse. He is capable of understanding humanity are our allies, and that is also mixed with the fact that he doesn't have a natural predisposition for hatred of humanity, as most Godzillas do in the past. He is capable of recognizing the weight of a sacrifice, something like what Dr. Serizawa did. He views that in the same way that he views Mothra's sacrifice at the end of King of the Monsters for him to save him. He is also Earth's guardian protector, going out of his way to face threats to the stability of Earth. He has at many times, to the detriment of future interactions, actually shown mercy. He didn't kill Ghidorah after he was frozen in ice. He spared Scar King after his rebellion the first time, and he thanked Kong by helping him take down Mechagodzilla by giving him his life as thanks. Essentially, the agreement at the end of Godzilla vs. Kong was, you go in the inner Earth and stay there, and I let you live. Now that has been somewhat retconned, to a degree. I mean, their actual agreement has kind of been retconned. But that, the symbiotic relationship with Mothra, his understanding of prior humans actually basically venerating and dying for him, are sacrifices that he carries, he understands, and he misses them. We see when he faces down Kevin, or rather Mechagodzilla, he looks not scared, not fearful when Mechagodzilla is standing over him. He just looks disappointed in himself. That after everything, this is how it ends for him. A walking tin can with an alien skull crammed in it. Contrary to his mindless aggressor and slayer of other titans portrayal, he is a rather compassionate creature, one capable of a very high degree of intelligence, but also one capable of formulating more complex battle strategies. He utilizes the terrain to his advantage against King Ghidorah and against Kong, slamming Ghidorah into building after building, fighting King Ghidorah underwater in an environment he knows Ghidorah does not have any advantage. When he meets Kong for the first time out on the ocean, his first impulse is drown the monkey. He tries to tip over the boat to drown him. Why fight a long, drawn-out battle mano-a-mano on top of a boat when he holds complete advantage? And once the fight was clearly over after Kong resurfaced after almost drowning, he could have kept going. The reason Godzilla didn't kill him is, one, mercy, but second, he doesn't want to kill Kong. Again, he prefers the, oddly, Taka no Jutsu, or I guess Rar no Jutsu in this case, that Naruto prefers, to convert enemies into allies, and all he wanted is Kong to just no longer not listen. He just wanted Kong to basically fall in line and also basically work with him in protecting Earth. That's really all it is just recognize my authority and I let you live. However, he is also capable of thinking very intelligently in battle when he needs to. It's just he prefers to rely on brute force. The Naruto comparison for his disposition towards enemies, I think, is a bit of a good one, as well as his battling disposition is more similar to, of all people, Jotaro Kujo. Godzilla is aware that he can just bulldoze most enemies. That's one of the reasons why he just bulldozes most things. He just goes brute force because he knows it works against most things. Same with Jotaro. But when push comes to shove and he needs to fight more intelligently and more strategically, that is exactly what he does. It's just simply far easier to atomic ray blast things than draw out a fight and try and overthink everything. He conserves energy when fighting the Muto because he knows it's going to be more valuable against the female than it will be against the male, who is, again, also capable of somewhat suppressing his atomic pulse, and is a much harder target. He's also capable of recognizing humanity are allies, and that not all humans, despite what Apex Cybernetics did, are not threats. The ability to distinguish individuality and individual motives, again, points to a relatively high degree of intelligence and thinking. Before we get on to the smartest Godzilla, I think it is important to bring up the one that will be unscored. and that is Singular Point. Because Singular Point Godzilla is something. Well, okay. This is gonna get a little bit 12th dimensional astrophysics-y, because all the kaiju in Godzilla Singular Point are extra dimensional entities that cannot fully appear in this reality. They are omnipotent extra dimensional things that are basically just observing, and they are so far above us that it is essentially a god. It is just simply that Godzilla, Manda, the Rodans, they are an avatar for it to experience things in our universe, and it really has the intentional, malevolent decision to want to basically destroy everything. But it is curious about things. Which is kind of why it's hard to put it anywhere on this list, because, like, we don't know what it is. But we know it is, like, it's omnipotent. It is, I don't know, it's weird. I like it, but it's weird. It involves, like, time loops, and, like, freaking, I don't know. It hurts my brain thinking about it. And I'm going to bet trying to explain it's hurting your brain, because I'm not good at explaining it. But all that is to say, your smartest Godzilla. By technicality, it's Kiryu. Okay, I know someone's gonna be saying that. Okay. Kiryu is the original Godzilla. Yes. However, it is the original Godzilla in a specific timeline. It is also the original Godzilla that is much more calm and much more collected than he is in the original movie. He also has had the entirety of the internet to understand all of humans' history and collected knowledge. This is a version of Godzilla that is very much capable of rationalizing and understanding. It is a version of Godzilla that has truly come to understand humanity, and understand that humanity and Godzilla see each other in very similar ways. It seeks to protect its own kind, but it also seeks to no longer fight. That's why at the end of Godzilla Tokyo SOS, it chooses not to use its remaining power to turn its weapons on humanity again, rather carry Godzilla out to sea. He is a horribly tragic figure, actually the most recent subject of our videos. But one with a very wide degree of emotions, one that simply desires peace for itself, and also shows that the Godzilla species is itself a relatively peaceful and actually compassionate species. Being able to, in a sense, befriend a human enough to wish them farewell, to choose not to take any more lives in battle, and to allow live and let live. All of this after enduring the tragedy of losing almost all of its kind. After being killed the first time by the oxygen destroyer, ripped from the afterlife, forced to do battle against its own kind, it chose to let everyone live. Showing a far greater understanding of really everything than any other Godzilla. It may not be as capable of a battle problem solver, it may not be as capable of facing multiple variable enemies, but it is capable of understanding and rationalizing things on its own that other Godzillas were incapable of doing, of understanding things that the other Godzillas simply couldn't grasp, while also having the entirety of humanity's collected and accumulated knowledge at its cybernetic claw tips. I'm kind of gonna stop it here before I start gushing more about Kiryu, because it is my favorite Mecha Godzilla. But that is gonna be all for today, everyone. Who do you think is the most intelligent Godzilla? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Don't forget to leave a like, comment your thoughts below. I've been Max Allo, and I'll see you guys next time. Long live Kaiju King.